a rickety old pickup truck, a quiet old man, and a group of young men mocking him at the gas station. "You call that heap of junk a truck? Aren't you too old to be driving, Grandpa?" They jeered, laughing loudly, convinced they'd landed the perfect zing. But the next morning, as their convoy of SUVs prepared to leave town, two military Humvees blocked the road. Marines stepped out, and one of them said coldly, "No one speaks to our former commander like that." Who was the man they ridiculed? And why did an entire community, even uniformed soldiers, stand ready to defend him? This is the story of a silent hero, a veteran who lived humbly, yet possessed the power to transform a whole town. Join us as we uncover his emotional journey, where honor, bravery, and respect triumph over every prejudice. Please hit the subscribe button on our channel so you can enjoy even more amazing, captivating stories. In the peaceful outskirts of Willow Creek, long before dawn's first light, 71-year-old James Callahan stepped out of his tiny mobile home to begin his daily routine. The crisp, early autumn air curled around the winding dirt road. He pulled his olive-drab jacket tight, leaned through the driver's window of his 1985 Chevy pickup, its faded silver paint scarred by time, and gripped the steering wheel. The truck groaned to life with that familiar clank, as if greeting an old friend. For 30 years, this battered vehicle had been his steadfast companion, a silent witness to every mile James had traveled. Each morning at exactly 5 o'clock, his alarm clock rang. He folded his blankets with military precision, corners squared, fabric stretched taut, an echo of the discipline he'd learned as a U.S. Marine logistics specialist. His humble home, just a bedroom, a tidy kitchenette, and a small desk strewn with route maps, was all he needed. After straightening his workspace and wiping the tabletop with a damp cloth, he stepped outside, inhaled deeply, and welcomed the day's first breeze. On the paint-worn road, James guided the Chevy slowly toward town. The dim streetlights shimmered through a thin veil of mist, and towering pines cast long, ghostly shadows along the roadside. He stopped before a dew-damp wooden house, unloaded a crate of supplies for the Rowan family, one of his most faithful recipients, and knocked gently. Stepping back, he watched as Mrs. Rowan emerged, gratitude warming her smile. Without a word, their trust had been forged over hundreds of quiet mornings. Next, he rolled into Miller's small garage. The retired mechanic still tinkered with engines under the soft glow of neon lights. James didn't just deliver goods, he offered help. Together, they tightened bolts and wiped grease from their hands. "You've got a Marine's touch," Miller would say, stroking his silver beard. Their laughter hid years of shared battles and midnight convoys through distant war zones. All morning, traffic was sparse. Only the hum of engines and birdsong filled the air, while James headed out to call the logistics office from the roadside, arranging his next orders. Logistics had been his mission in uniform. Now he served his community with the same dedication, meticulously planning each trip, calculating optimal routes, and double-checking every package, whether rice sacks or instant noodle cartons, before departure. The townspeople of Willow Creek had grown accustomed to the sight of the elderly man and his weathered truck. Some fondly called him the road grader, for he smoothed life's little bumps. At Mrs. Jenkins's corner store, he'd pause for black coffee and a slice of freshly toasted bread. They'd chat of weather and harvests, and she'd notice the slight weariness in his step, the fleeting sadness in his eyes. He'd only smile, answer a call, and hurry back to the truck. James's kindness spread like a gentle wave, repairing a neighbor's leaking pipe, changing a stranded motorist's tire under the midday sun, delivering disaster relief supplies without charge. He never asked for pay. His generosity rekindled faith in humanity across Willow Creek. Yet few knew the trials beneath his lean frame and stooped shoulders. Nights spent guarding convoys through Iraq's burning deserts, sleepless watches over supply lines, the painful memories of comrades lost. Only his old friend, retired Captain Carter, knew the full story. They corresponded by letters and emails, meeting at veterans' reunions. Carter recalled James commanding a unit that hauled weapons and rations through some of the fiercest combat zones. James never boasted, only remarked calmly, "We did our job. The outcomes spoke for themselves." That creed shaped him, humble in peace, eager to share his skills when the uniform came off. As afternoon waned, James finished his last delivery and steered the Chevy home. He stopped at the mobile home window where his Marine Corps badge hung, its enamel dulled by years of service. He leaned on the doorframe, looked back at the truck, tangible proof of a life lived in service, and drew in the scent of damp grass and earth after last night's rain, a haunting blend of loss and pride. Inside, he prepared a simple supper: boiled carrots, creamy mashed potatoes, a slice of savory pork, and a hot cup of tea. Under the soft yellow lamp, he spread out his route maps, from Willow Creek to Mariposa Valley, from San Diego Harbor to remote forward bases, and at precisely 9 o'clock, he opened his journal and wrote, "Morning rain, delivered to Rowan, helped Miller with repairs, another peaceful morning." Then he turned off the light, closed the journal, and climbed into bed. Before closing his eyes, he gazed once more at that fading badge, as if thanking his past for the man he'd become. Few would ever know James Callahan's heroic tale, yet he lived each day with discipline, kindness, and humility, a quiet pillar to his small town. For James, being a veteran wasn't about medals or awards. It was a responsibility to keep serving, so every sunrise began with another act of goodwill. Under the pale moon, the alarm would rest, but his heart still beat to that steady rhythm of duty, ready for the next meaningful dawn. On a Tuesday evening washed in sunset hues along Interstate 40, James Callahan began his long-haul delivery by pulling his beaten-up Chevy into the Sunny Hill gas station, just outside Carson Hollow. The day's last light stretched the shadows of nearby trees across the lot, highlighting every rusted patch on his weathered cargo bed. James braced himself as he climbed down, each step a reminder of the miles ahead. His back twinged from shifting through gears to conquer hundreds of miles. The engine's rattling sputter fell silent when he yanked out the gas can. His elbow shook with fatigue rather than age. The sharp scent of fuel and warm exhaust filled the air. A brief, familiar pause in his journey, for he treated every station as a trusted resting spot among the miles. Ahead on the highway, no freight trucks passed. Only 3 gleaming black SUVs parked neatly beneath fluorescent lights, their metallic surfaces reflecting the glow like a broken mirror. 3 young men, dressed in outdoor gear, Patagonia jackets, rolled-cuff jeans, pristine trekking boots, gathered around a cooler of drinks. Their laughter rang out as they popped open beer cans, youthful excitement still pulsing through their voices. James watched from a distance. Once he'd finished fueling, he ambled into the convenience store to pay. Through the glass door, a 20-something wearing sunglasses despite the gloom sneered, "Look at that heap of junk. Hey, Grandpa, don't think that 85 truck has any road left in it." The barb cut deep into a man who had once crossed desert dunes and thunderous trenches. His friends roared, tapping the bed where James's hands had gripped the wheel, mocking, "Old-timer, retire already. Stop endangering people with that thing." Their raucous taunts seeped through the thin glass, shaking the store's quiet. The cashier, a gentle young man, lowered his gaze, unwilling to meet anyone's eyes. Beside him, a silver-haired lady clutched her paper coffee cup, shaking her head in dismay but too timid to speak up. All fell silent before the reckless disrespect of youth. James approached the counter, placed his transaction slip and exact change on the glass. He said nothing rude, offered no retort, only opened his wallet with measured calm, bowed slightly to the cashier and the elderly woman. His lean frame and steady shoulders spoke of the dignity earned in his days as a U.S. Marine. After receiving his receipt, James moved toward the door. The cashier watched him go with a mixture of wounded pride and newfound respect, as though realizing the man's silver hair and battered truck hid a lifetime of trials. The old lady whispered, "No one deserves that treatment," and offered James a consoling smile, as if to ease his solitude amidst the boorish youths. The echo of their mockery still hovered outside when the three young men stumbled out, half-finished beers in hand, ready to continue their night's mountain trek. They didn't notice the sudden hush. The roar of engines filled the air, and shadows in uniform emerged under the streetlights. Two sand-colored military Humvees rolled in, blocking the SUV's path. Doors flung open, and Marines spilled onto the pavement, faces stern, eyes resolute. One stepped forward, voice calm yet uncompromising. "No one speaks to our former commander like that." His words hit like a hammer. Beer cans clattered to the ground, and the youths bowed their heads, stunned by the warrior's authority. James felt his phone chime in his jacket pocket but remained still, unwilling to turn around. He knew the younger generation might not grasp sacrifice or camaraderie, but this moment, when Marines silenced the jeers to defend him, spoke volumes. Respect isn't bought, it's earned through decades of service and sacrifice. When the troops departed, leaving only hush and the station's pale lights, James strolled back to his pickup. He knelt to wipe the door handle, greeting an old friend waiting to roll once more. Every spot of rust, every scratch on its silver flank, bore witness to his steadfast journey. He climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, letting its familiar rattle blend with the night breeze. Behind him, the SUVs glinted under the station lights, while ahead, the Chevy's faded paint and headlights wove a hazy ribbon of light down Interstate 40. To most, it was merely a roadside stop, a passing moment. But to James, each pit stop was an essential part of a life committed to humility and service. As the engine's steady pulse carried him onward, the highway stretched out like a silk ribbon in the dark, beckoning steadfast souls to press on. In that instant, James was more than a driver. He was the quiet embodiment of courage, the living testament to honor and respect. The wind whispered past the window, urging him forward. In any circumstance, the spirit of a Marine would always light the way. James placed the last dollar bill into the tray before the cashier. Then he quietly folded it in half and slipped it into his worn leather wallet. Each coin and note he counted like a marker on his personal map of memories. The long deployments, the emergency resupplies under fire, and the simpler days eking out a living back home. When the receipt printed, he nodded in greeting. Beneath his composed exterior lay a symphony of emotions: pride, fatigue, and steadfast resolve. Stepping outside, James stood among the cold pump nozzles. The three glossy black SUVs still waited, fluorescent lights glinting off their polished metal. The young men from before surged around his truck, their voices louder now as they blocked his path and hoisted beer cans in challenge. One youth bent forward, covering his ears theatrically and grinding his teeth. "Can you hear anything? Is your engine running? Or is it about to explode?" Their giggles echoed obnoxiously. James said nothing. He unlatched his door slowly and slid into the familiar seat. The old cushion creaked in welcome, like an old comrade greeting him after 3 decades. He bent forward, clicked the stained yellow seatbelt into place, and silently engaged the lock. Before turning the key, he looked at them through the scratched window. For a moment, he lowered the glass just enough and spoke in a warm, measured tone. "This truck's old, but it hauls things you couldn't even imagine." His brief words cut through the air like a silent shot, leaving the young men staring in bewilderment. The engine coughed twice, then settled into a steady roar. Sparks flickered in the engine bay, rousing life in the battered Chevy. The youths pounded on the hood and jeered, but their noise faded as James eased his foot onto the accelerator. The wheels turned slowly. The red taillights blinked, casting patchy shadows on the pavement, then receded into the night. They shrugged and exchanged half-hearted sighs, immersing themselves in their own revelry, beer in one hand, blaring pop music from the SUV's radio. The old man and his useless truck were quickly forgotten, as if they'd never existed. But behind James's silence lay events about to ignite. Inside the store, Ethan Parker, the lanky cashier with hair sticking up, could no longer hide his discomfort. He set his pen down and leaned toward the store manager, Clara, a neat, middle-aged woman with gentle, deep-set eyes. Ethan whispered, "Ma'am, his name is James Callahan. They say he was a legend in the Marine Corps." Clara closed her eyes for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Some people don't understand that silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's strength." Clara's words would echo in James's mind even as he drove away. Though no one heard them, he knew his silence was not born of helplessness. It was the way he preserved the honor and dignity of a lifetime in uniform, defending his comrades and his ideals. When James rejoined Interstate 40, night had fully fallen. Streetlights flickered on, casting pale yellow beams onto tire tracks stamped in the asphalt. A cold wind whipped past the window, carrying the scents of gasoline and old newsprint inside the cab. James pressed his lips together, letting the chill seep into muscles hardened by years of service. He brushed his sleeve, wiped a bead of sweat from his brow, and returned the world to silence, save for the engine's steady rhythm. The highway lay empty. Only the occasional freight truck flashed by, its headlights bright for a heartbeat, then gone. James maintained a steady speed, hands firm on the wheel. In the cab, the worn steering wheel bore every groove and scratch like chapters in a story. He remembered the day he first received his 1985 Chevy, its engine smooth, paint pristine. Every trial since had proven that neither age nor appearance defines one's worth. Ahead, the road stretched like a ribbon before James's heart. Each mile marked a new chapter. He drifted through quiet countryside, rolling hills lit by the soft glow of streetlights. Sometimes, he slowed to watch a herd of deer amble across. Other times, he accelerated into winding mountain passes, letting the engine roar as a test of his old companion's mettle. At every gas station, James pulled in. He paid in cash, counting every bill with care. He never asked for discounts, never hustled for a deal, only simple respect for another person's work. He believed true value lay in attitude, in how one treated others, regardless of who they were. After hours on the road, dawn broke just as James reached his final stop before heading home. He parked, straightened his cuff, and stepped onto the cold concrete. Though he bent slightly at the waist, his spine remained erect, as if bracing an invisible bayonet of military discipline. At the store door, Ethan Parker and Clara awaited with 2 steaming cups of coffee. The manager stepped out with a warm smile. "Mr. Callahan, it's been a while." James nodded in thanks, his eyes lighting with simple joy. He accepted the cup and inhaled deeply, letting the aroma of fresh coffee fill the early air. Sometimes a story needs no flourish, just a cup of coffee and a kind glance to fuel the next leg of the journey. Through the glass, the three young men from last night likely slept off their hangovers, unaware that their mockery had sparked a chain of events. They didn't understand they'd struck at the dignity of a man, and a Marine who spent his youth defending freedom. But James knew every step he took, every moment of silence he kept, carried a power that rose above the world's clamor. And so, as James climbed back into the cab, fired up the engine, and turned toward the rising sun, his old 1985 Chevy rolled on, witness to the strength of silence, the perseverance of character, and the quiet courage within. In his heart, every road told a story. Every grateful smile warmed his aging spirit. Though the world hurried by, James navigated at his own pace, certain that one day people would realize, sometimes silence is the greatest strength of all. In the warm glow of the little diner beside the Sunny Hill station, yellow lights danced across worn wooden tables and chairs. Beyond the windows, night had fallen over Interstate 40. Broken only by the boisterous young men continuing their beer-fueled party and the low thump of music from a portable speaker. Inside, behind the counter, Ethan Parker, the thoughtful young man with tousled hair, methodically wiped down the old cash register. He tried to focus on his work, yet his mind drifted to another place entirely. He recalled his uncle, Captain Robert Parker, leaning in during a family gathering to share a hurried story. His uncle, once a Marine unit commander, spoke of a special comrade, a fearless logistics driver in Afghanistan who had plunged through gunfire to rescue a wounded brother in arms. That man was James Callahan, a silent legend now living humbly in Willow Creek. Ethan saw him in his mind's eye, dust-covered and resolute, steering a truck across the desert with unwavering determination. A sudden burst of rude laughter from the window table snapped Ethan back. The youths reenacted their mockery of James. One wearing dark glasses feigned covering his ears, another hoisted a half-empty beer can and jeered, "Does your truck run on engines or bombs?" The harsh, fluorescent light glinted off their high-end Patagonia gear, making their designer clothes clash with the diner's rustic charm. 4. In the warm glow of the little diner beside the Sunny Hill station, yellow lights danced across worn wooden tables and chairs. Beyond the windows, night had fallen over Interstate 40, broken only by the boisterous young men continuing their beer-fueled party and the low thump of music from a portable speaker. Inside, behind the counter, Ethan Parker, the thoughtful young man with tousled hair, methodically wiped down the old cash register. He tried to focus on his work, yet his mind drifted to another place entirely. He recalled his uncle, Captain Robert Parker, leaning in during a family gathering to share a hurried story. His uncle, once a Marine unit commander, spoke of a special comrade, a fearless logistics driver in Afghanistan who had plunged through gunfire to rescue a wounded brother in arms. That man was James Callahan, a silent legend now living humbly in Willow Creek. Ethan saw him in his mind's eye, dust-covered and resolute, steering a truck across the desert with unwavering determination. A sudden burst of rude laughter from the window table snapped Ethan back. The youths reenacted their mockery of James. One wearing dark glasses feigned covering his ears. Another hoisted a half-empty beer can and jeered, "Does your truck run on engines or bombs?" The harsh fluorescent light glinted off their high-end Patagonia gear, making their designer clothes clash with the diner's rustic charm. Ethan looked through the grimy glass, his eyes fixed on the faded military ID dangling from the rear-view mirror of James's 1985 Chevy. Beside it, the Marine Corps emblem, a proud eagle, globe, and anchor, was taped to the back window as a silent testament to a life spent fighting for freedom. These small details meant everything. Yet the young men, lost in their cruelty, failed to see the weight behind that badge, the depth of honor and brotherhood it represented. Finishing his wipe down, Ethan rose and approached the window, his hand resting on the cool wood of the frame. In the brief hush beneath the rising haze from the idling truck, he thought, they've never seen him strap on extra harnesses for a heavy load. They've never looked into the eyes of grateful comrades when he arrived. The thought tugged at his heart, stirring a fierce sense of injustice. Returning to the counter, Ethan's gaze shone with resolve. He wouldn't, and couldn't, eject the rowdy group. That wasn't his authority. But he leaned toward Clara, the kindly middle-aged owner with her hair pinned neatly, and whispered, "What do you make of their behavior?" Clara paused in the quiet, then nodded slowly. "That's James Callahan. My nephew says he was a legend in the Marines. Some people don't realize silence isn't weakness. Sometimes, it's the greatest strength." Clara's words echoed in Ethan's mind throughout the rest of his shift. From the open kitchen wafted the comforting aroma of toasted bread and simmering beef stew. Ethan prepared orders, sandwiches and crispy fries, for the late-night highway workers, each step measured and gentle, as though he dared not disturb the loaded silence. When the clock chimed the late hour, the young men finally dispersed. They gathered their gear, stumbled outside, leaving behind 2 half-empty beers and the fading echo of their smug grins. Ethan exhaled, closed the diner window, and flicked on the overhead light. From the drawer, he retrieved a small wooden plaque engraved James Callahan and a tarnished metal Marine emblem. He placed them reverently on the counter and lit a small scented candle, an unspoken tribute to the man so often overlooked. Outside, the night wind slipped through the crack, carrying the desert's chill across the pavement. In that dim light, Ethan quietly locked the diner, bid Clara goodnight, and stepped into the darkness. He watched the silver Chevy glide past the street lamps and vowed, "Tomorrow, if he should need it, I'll be at his side, fueling his tank or changing his tire, because he deserves respect." A few miles down the highway, at a roadside motel, James Callahan unlocked his room door with a well-worn silver key. Inside, the simple space held a single bed, a small cabinet, and a table with a kettle for tea. He set his bag on the floor, tapped the ceiling fan 3 times for luck, then drew from the nightstand drawer a yellowed photograph. The image captured a frozen moment in the Afghan desert. 4 Marines lined up before a supply truck, dust-coated but beaming, eyes bright despite the grit on their uniforms. Among them, a young, strong James smiled kindly, arm draped over a comrade's shoulder. In faded ink on the corner, it read, 3-1 Platoon, April 12, 2006. James placed the photo on the table, the small lamp's glow casting shadows across his weathered face. His finger traced each face, haunted by memories of brothers fallen amid scorching sands. He closed his eyes, drew in a deep breath as the fan stirred the stale air, sweeping away the smoke of recollection. No bitterness, no blame. James knew the jeers at the gas station were merely noise. He gently folded the photograph and tucked it into his threadbare jacket pocket. Before climbing into bed, he made his blanket square with military precision. Corners neat, fabric smooth, an ingrained ritual from combat days. Before extinguishing the light, he looked once more at the marine emblem, the proud eagle, globe, and anchor, swaying before the small mirror. He nodded softly, as if greeting a silent comrade, the warriors of long ago, and himself, ever steadfast, ever humble. The ceiling fan clicked gently, matching his even breaths as James Callahan closed the cover on another day. Though the world outside buzzed with ignorant jeers, he held fast to the values of a veteran: silent strength, unwavering resolve, and quiet courage. Night deepened, and in the solitude of the roadside room, James drifted to sleep, carrying the silent pride of a life fought for ideals and still delivering the power of his bravery onward. The next morning, as dawn's first rays danced on Carson Hollow's tin roofs, the air felt crisp and alive. Interstate 40 lay quieter than usual, with only the occasional truck slipping by. At Sunny Hill Station, Ryan and his friends looked bleary from last night's revelry. Their 3 glossy black SUVs sat askew, hoods cloaked in a thin veil of frost. Ryan bent over the pump for his coffee and warm roll. His eyes were still heavy, barely believing morning had come. They hurried through a simple breakfast, strong black coffee and a crisp, freshly baked roll. The sweet, buttery flavor clung to them as they climbed back into their SUVs, convinced breakfast would fuel their journey home. But the moment they punched the accelerator, the engines groaned weakly. The mood shifted instantly. Through the morning mist, 2 sand-colored military Humvees materialized, blocking the intersection like an invisible barrier. Ryan slammed on the brakes, stunned as 6 Marines disembarked in crisp helmets, standing at attention by their vehicles. The dawn breeze billowed their jackets, revealing the familiar eagle globe anchor badge on each chest. Ryan whispered in disbelief, half to himself, "What the hell is going on?" An officer strode forward, tall and stern, voice cold. "Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Captain Robert Parker. Please present your identification." Without another word, the dark-lensed gaze of a second Marine swept over the 3 young men, no refusal possible. Ryan's hand trembled as he retrieved his driver's license. His heart thundered, each second stretching out like oil on water. Under the pale dawn light, the license was examined with care, then returned with a slight nod. Yet Captain Parker's eyes remained unwavering as he approached Ryan, voice firm but respectful. "Last night, here at Sunny Hill, you mocked a man driving a 1985 Chevy, his age and his old truck. That man is James Callahan, former U.S. Marine Corps sergeant, awarded the Bronze Star, one of the highest honors for valor." Silence fell, their faces drained of color at the name. A soft breeze carried the scrape of a roadside broom. Curious locals peeked from porches, whispers spreading like wildfire. Suddenly, a 10-year-old girl slipped free of her mother's grasp. Wide-eyed, she called out, "Mr. Callahan saved soldiers!" She never imagined yesterday's joke would echo in her heart. Her mother hugged her close, pride lighting her gaze. Captain Parker surveyed the crowd, then nodded and continued in a warm, measured tone. In 2004, near Kandahar, James Callahan drove his truck through 3 lines of enemy fire to reach wounded comrades. He plunged into the inferno to evacuate 7 Marines and crucial communications equipment to safety. He was struck by shrapnel in the shoulder, but he stayed at the wheel until reinforcements arrived. His words rang out across the hushed space. A few bystanders blinked back tears. Years ago, Captain Parker himself was one of those James saved. His voice caught as he confessed, "I was among those he rescued." Before a drunken jibe could follow, the youths froze, Their arrogance and bravado instantaneously evaporated. They glanced at one another, shame flooding their eyes. The air held the solemnity of a small ceremony honoring quiet heroism. One of the group, silent until now, stepped forward, voice shaking. We're sorry." The apology was brief but heartfelt. Captain Parker nodded in response, their eyes meeting in a wordless pardon. From behind them, James's battered Chevy rolled into view, pulling neatly to the curb. The thin, stooped figure emerged, steps slow but unwavering. Morning light glinted on his silver hair, and his weathered face held serene strength. No words were needed. James approached Captain Parker and offered a respectful nod to his old comrade. Witnesses rushed forward to welcome him. They draped a warm knit scarf around his neck, handed him wildflowers plucked in autumn breeze, and showered him with genuine thanks. The embarrassed youths retreated, looking at James with deep, newfound respect instead of scorn. James smiled gently, the lines around his mouth bearing the weight of a lifetime in service. He nodded politely to each person, then turned to the young men. "Life isn't just about what you see on the surface. There are values you've yet to understand." His simple words reverberated, silencing the crowd. As the highway patrol's siren cut through the morning air, escorting James safely away, he climbed back into his Chevy. Before settling into the driver's seat, he glanced once more at the intersection, where a lesson in courage and camaraderie had unfolded. Then he tapped the accelerator. The deep red taillights pulsed, and the old Chevy eased back into traffic on Interstate 40, carrying the story of a quiet hero who awakened the hearts of those who once mocked him. Captain Parker stood by the road, gently tracing the badge on his chest, pride shining in his eyes. In that moment, Carson Hollow felt warmer, reminded that the greatest values often lie in humble, silent courage. The next morning, as dawn's first rays danced on Carson Hollow's rickety tin roofs, the air felt crisp and alive. Interstate 40 lay quieter than usual, punctuated only by the occasional silent rumble of a passing truck. At Sunny Hill Station, Ryan and his friends looked bleary from last night's revelry. Their 3 glossy black SUVs sat askew, hoods cloaked in a thin veil of dawn frost. Ryan bent to gather his coffee and a steaming roll. His eyes were still heavy, as if he could not believe morning had arrived. They hurried through a simple breakfast, strong black coffee and a crisp, just-baked roll. The sweet, buttery aftertaste clung to them as they climbed into their vehicles, convinced this meal would fuel their return to the city. But the moment they punched the accelerator and the engines groaned weakly, the mood shifted. Through the morning mist, 2 sand-colored military Humvees appeared, blocking the intersection like an impenetrable barrier. Ryan slammed on the brakes, stunned as 6 Marines disembarked in rigid formation. Their polished helmets glinted in the pale light, jackets billowing in the breeze to reveal the proud Eagle Globe anchor badge on each chest. Ryan muttered, half in disbelief, "What the hell is going on?" A tall officer stepped forward, voice cold and authoritative. "Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Captain Robert Parker. Please present your identification." Without a chance to refuse, Ryan's hand trembled as he retrieved his driver's license. Each heartbeat seemed to echo in the stillness. Under the faint glow of dawn, the license was examined meticulously, then returned with a slight nod. Yet Captain Parker's gaze remained unwavering as he approached Ryan, voice firm yet respectful. "Last night at Sunny Hill, you mocked the man driving that 1985 Chevy, his age in that old truck. That man is James Callahan, former U.S. Marine Corps Sergeant, recipient of the Bronze Star, one of the highest honors for valor." Silence fell like a curtain. their faces drained of color at the name. A soft breeze carried the scrape of a roadside broom. Curious locals peeked from doorways, whispers spreading like wildfire. Suddenly, a 10-year-old girl slipped free of her mother's grasp. Wide-eyed, she called out, "Mr. Callahan saved soldiers!" Her mother hurried to embrace her, pride shining in her eyes. Captain Parker scanned the crowd, then continued in a warm, measured tone. In 2004, near Kandahar, James Callahan drove his truck through 3 lines of enemy fire to reach wounded comrades. He plunged into the inferno to evacuate 7 Marines and vital communications equipment to safety. He was wounded by shrapnel in the shoulder, but he stayed at the wheel until reinforcements arrived. His words rang out in the hushed morning. A few onlookers blinked back tears. Captain Parker's voice trembled as he admitted, "I was one of those he rescued." The young men stood frozen. Their arrogance dissolved instantly, replaced by shame and remorse. The intersection felt consecrated, as though honoring a quiet act of heroism. One youth, voice shaking, stepped forward. We're sorry." His apology was brief, but heartfelt. Captain Parker offered a simple nod of absolution. At that moment, James's battered Chevy emerged from the opposite direction. He braked sharply and parked just a few paces from the assembly. He paused to wipe sweat from his brow. Confusion flickered in his eyes as he took in the solemn scene. Captain Parker, still in dress uniform, marched over and stood at attention. "Sergeant Callahan," he intoned with deep respect, "it is an honor to see you again." James inclined his head and replied warmly, "Captain, it's good to see you too." Then he frowned slightly and asked, "What's all this about, Captain? Is there a problem?" Parker shook his head, face solemn. "No problem, Sergeant. We simply wish to confirm who you are before allowing the convoy to proceed." Ryan and his friends eased out of their SUVs, eyes cast down in shame. They muttered reluctant apologies, voices hollow in the charged silence. We're sorry, sir," Ryan stammered, regret shining in his eyes. James offered a gentle smile and a nod. "It's all right. Water under the bridge." His warm tone outshone the morning chill. But the story did not end there. Captain Parker moved beside James and spoke so all could hear. "Sergeant, may I recount your 2004 mission in Kandahar?" All eyes turned back to Parker as he detailed the ambush in the desert. How James had driven through enemy fire 3 times, heart pounding, to reach his fallen brothers. How he navigated burning wreckage and advancing foot soldiers. How, once he'd delivered 7 Marines and critical equipment to safety, he finally exhaled, though his shoulder bore the sting of shrapnel. As Parker spoke, a Marine approached carrying a dark wooden box. He opened it to reveal the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, an honor James should have received long ago. "You should have had this years ago," Parker said solemnly, pinning the gleaming medal to James's worn uniform. The crowd, locals and once mocking youths, stood hushed, tears glistening. The elderly woman from the convenience store, eyes red, leaned heavily on her broom. Ethan Parker, the cashier, placed a hand over the medal on James's chest, pride and emotion mingling in his gaze. Ryan, pale and ashamed, stepped forward once more. His voice shook. "We judged you wrong. We're sorry." James met his gaze, eyes deep with compassion. "The greatest lesson I've learned is that character shows when no one's watching. I hope you've learned that today." Sunny Hill Station felt inexplicably warm.
Amid this ordinary village intersection, the townspeople spontaneously held a small celebration. They planted tiny flags along the pumps, laid wildflowers around James's Chevy, and broke into heartfelt applause for the silent hero. News of the ceremony spread across social media. The hashtag #SilentHeroes trended nationwide, drawing thousands of viewers. Logan, a YouTuber known for inspirational stories, posted footage with the caption, "Proof that humility and courage can change hearts." Within hours, the video amassed hundreds of thousands of views and thousands of respectful comments. Carson Hollow's town council followed suit. They renamed this stretch of Interstate 40, where James was honored, as Callahan Way. A gleaming sign went up at the very intersection, reminding every passerby of respect and gratitude. Yet for James, life remained unchanged. After the ceremony, he returned to his faithful Chevy. He brushed the newly awarded medal on his chest, then placed his hands on the familiar wheel. No grand fanfare shone in his eyes, only simple joy at returning to an ordinary life where he could continue small acts of service. He started the engine, and the truck's familiar clatter echoed like an old marching drum. Behind him, local cars peeled away onto Interstate 40. Some drivers waved farewell, others dabbed at tears. James returned their waves with a single flash of his headlights and then slowly merged into traffic. In the days that followed, James maintained his routine. Up at 5 o'clock sharp, blankets folded military style, a strong cup of coffee, and the Chevy on the road for deliveries. He still repaired engines and carried supplies for neighbors in need, never accepting a cent. To him, the recognition was fleeting. The true calling remained service and humility. Those who once mocked now greeted him by name, offering him coffee whenever they saw his Chevy pass by. Ryan invited James to speak at the high school about discipline and courage. Every weekend, Ethan visited with newspapers and questions about Afghanistan. Thus, Carson Hollow's peaceful life took on a new hue, a hue of gratitude and honor for quiet valor. In the sighing pines along the highway, in the rumble of outbound trucks, the image of Sergeant James Callahan endures, a silent hero, disciplined Marine, arms forever open to help others. And perhaps that is the most compelling story any American audience could ever hear. Please leave your thoughts and share your comments. Help spread these inspiring stories to your family and friends across the USA.